Perek Shlishi, he talks about Hadugma ha'ishis shel ha'mechanech. This is really super important. Every Sefer talks about that. Being a role model, being a personal example that every mechanech has to be. There's unlimited amount of stories and svarim about it, but we're gonna learn now what the Nesivei Chinuch, what the Nesivei Shalom says. Av shegam b'chinuch hakloli toifes mokim rashi inyan hadugma ishis shel ha'mechanech. Even though with general chinuch, math, history, information chinuch, it plays an important role. The concept that the teacher should be an example, a role model. That every teacher, every educator, every parent should be an example to the child of how you're supposed to live. And this is going to affect the child much more than any kind of teichacha, criticism. You can punish your kid, you can criticize, but if they see that you're not legit, that affects them no matter what you're doing. And when they see you are committed and you are legit and you're living in a good way, that affects them, influences them, without saying anything, like we said before. B'li omer ve'ein dvarim. Just like the Avirah. When you are a dugma ishis and they see mommy is davening and tati is davening, takes things seriously, that affects them much more than when they're not interested, saying, what's the matter with you? How come you don't want to daven? How come you don't want to learn? Even when we're talking about other types of chinuch, which is chitzoni, which is external, he says when it comes to external teachings, education, the teacher doesn't really have to be a good guy. The English teacher coming to teach English studies doesn't really need to be a person. He just has to act fine in front of the kids, because if he doesn't act fine and nice and show that he cares, that's going to hurt the kids. But there's nothing emotional or spiritual happening here. He's teaching English studies. He's teaching a concept. So yes, if he comes in and he's a bum and he's not a good person, that could affect the kids. But if he comes in and he talks nicely, in a nice bakavadik way, he doesn't curse, he doesn't say bad things, then what he's doing on his own time outside of the school, says the Nesivei Shalom, is fine. It doesn't affect the children. Achin, kishemedubar bechinech Yehudi pnimi. But when we're talking about being mechanech, a Yiddish chinuch, the nefesh ruach neshama that he spoke about in the first chapter, pnimi, which is inside, hanefech neshama beishiyus hachanech, which it seeks to develop, to breathe life and to develop the inner core and the character traits and the personality of the student. Chayves hadugma ishis higam bepnimius. V'chol masha mechanech oisa afilu b'chadri chador mashpia al hachanech. When we are doing a pnimiistika, internal chinuch on the child, that they should be on the inside, turned onto Yiddishkeit, and to be edel and to have all good midas, then it makes a difference what's going on in the inside of the educator or the parent. It's a big chiddush. It's not just what they see, the way that you're acting, but it's who you are internally. When they don't see you, that's what it takes in order to be mashpia on these children, on our children. Yisrael, even if we're not prophets, we're the children of prophets. Even more so these little kids. Everybody says, yeah, kids, what do they know? He says, no. We know that Ketanim have, the Nevuah was given to children. They have highly sensitive radar. They're emotionally sensitive. They have the instinct that enables them to know and penetrate the depths of the educator, to know the essence of the parent and the educator. They pick up on it, what we really are all about. If, for example, the educator is preaching to the student not to run after his taivas, his forbidden pleasures, or he says, you know what, when you're fighting with kids your age, you should be mavral midoisav, don't get angry, you should give in. You shouldn't get angry, you shouldn't be a liar, you shouldn't boast and be a balgaiva. And he's trying to get him to learn all these things. He tells these kids All of these character traits, he boosts them and he builds them. As I hashpa musnes be'eze mida hayeled margisho avay mechanech atzmai nemon ledvarav ba'isem inyanim. The influence of the words, the influence of the educator, is going to depend on how much the educator himself actually lives that way. If he's be'etzem a Baal Gaiva, he's saying even if the kids don't know that he's a Baal Gaiva, even if he's not a Baal Gaiva in front of the kids, if he's a shakran, if he's a ragzan, if he has kas, he gets angry, if he's not mavater, then it's not going to work. The kids, even though you're giving the perfect speech, Yirah Shamayim, Emunah, Bitachon, anything that is spiritual will not penetrate into the child. And we'll say, why? Why isn't it getting there? And the kids could listen, they could repeat what he said, but it's not going to change them. Pnimi, chinuch pnimi. Internal chinuch, you can give the best speeches in the world. But if you aren't that way, now he's saying a double thing. Everybody says, if you're a hypocrite, they're not going to listen to you. We know that. If they see you doing the opposite and you give them a shmooze, that's abusive. That's emotional, spiritual abuse. It's hypocrisy. Avada, that doesn't work. He's saying an edel azach. If you're preaching, let's say, don't talk Lashon Hara, and they never see you talk Lashon Hara, but at night when you're not around, you do talk Lashon Hara, says the Nesivei Shalom, you won't penetrate and be mechanech the children. They won't know why. You won't know why. Your principal, your grandparents won't know why. Nobody will know why, but you won't change the pnimi. He's telling you a spiritual zach here. Mitam zeh, hoyu chasidim ha'anshe ma'aseh, moisrim es nafsham, limtzoi melamed u'mechanech yirei shamayim, u'misnag b'ktushi yisera al manashe yichanech es b'neihem. What did the holy people do when they were looking for someone to teach their children? They didn't look for someone with the best skill. They looked for the holiest person that they could find. Someone who himself has tremendous Yirah Shamayim, can give over Yirah Shamayim to the children. Someone who himself is misnaig in his own life, b'kedusha yisera, with tremendous holiness. That person has a higher chance. That person has much higher chance to influence our children to have these milas. V'im b'chala inyanim kach. If it's like this for everything, like we said, all character traits and spiritual levels, but it's especially Hari b'miyuchad b'negei l'taharis u'bihiris ha'amuna ha'shlema sha'yeled mispoinin u'makar ad kamahu atzmei baraloi u'mamen b'amun shlema sha'emes kacha. When it comes to giving over emuna, even more, the child knows internally. He's saying even a young child doesn't even know what he knows. He could feel if the person talking to him about emuna, the Rebbe or the parent is instilling faith into the child, they know if you really believe it or not. They know how much it is clear to you that you really have emunah. And it's in two levels. Again, it's two levels. One thing is that sometimes we preach emunah, you got to believe everything is bashert, and then they see somebody spill something and you're yelling at them. What happened to bashert? They go ahead and something breaks that's precious to them and they're crying and you say gamzu l'taiva, and then something that's precious to you breaks and they see you getting angry. What happened to gamzu l'taiva? They see that, something doesn't work out for them and you say, listen, everything Hashem does is good and you have to have emunah, Hashem runs the world. And then they see that you have a loss or you have a problem. What happened to your emunah? Where's your bitachon? You tell your kids, don't worry, have bitachon, and then you don't have bitachon. So that's hypocrisy. We're not even talking about that. We're not even talking about, of course that's not going to work. It becomes crazy. It makes children crazy that you're talking to them about doing something that you yourself don't do. Don't talk during davening and you talk during davening. All of that stuff, for sure, it doesn't work on any level. But we're talking here deeper. Even if they don't see anything from you, they see a tzaddik. They see you never ever go against anything you teach them. But if b'chadrei chadarim, if you really essentially don't get it, you don't really have that level of emunah, you can't give over to your children. They sense it. Now, when I learned this, it seemed a little extreme. But the truth is, there are certain people today that people gravitate to them to learn about emunah. And you see, we just really can sense that they really believe it. You could hear a shir in emunah from a regular guy, and you could hear a shir from emunah from Ramosha Wolfson. Soll sein gesund. How could you compare? The olam is nicht kein goyim. People aren't stupid. We know who to gravitate to. There are people that you could tell that he's not just living it for us to see. You could tell who's real. You could see tzaddikim that are real. And even if they're not tzaddikim, even if on regular people, we have to be real. We have to get real. We have to work on ourselves so we can give over the messages to our children. Says the Nesivei Shalom, Im chas v'shalom, ha-mechanech ein emunosei kol kach behira. If God forbid, the mechanech, which is a parent or a teacher, doesn't have real faith, clear faith in Hashem, it causes damage to the child until he's old and gray. Tzaddikim have already said that there's a lot of different damages you could have. But if you have a pagam, a deficiency in emunah and Hashem, it's like having a hole in the membrane of the brain. What happens if you have a hole, God forbid, in the membrane of the brain? It's a nicht gute Sache. When you have a pagam, a damage in stam, one of your ivarim, person can live on. But if a person has damage in the membrane of his brain, even the tiniest hole, he's a dead man walking. Even if afterwards the child is hearing from this teacher, from this parent, only divrei Torah, but nafshoy nifgemes chas v'sholom, his nefesh, his soul is damaged chas v'sholom, ad kadei she'emunasai loitia yatziva kol hayomim, that his emunah, the child's emunah, will not be steadfast, consistent, and strong for all the days of his life, because the person instilling emunah into him didn't have clear emunah.